Just done our sound checks, and thank you, everyone. I think Maxime will be joining us shortly, I hope, but we can start into our meeting, and I'm looking forward to the testimonies. Welcome to our witnesses. This is meeting number 47 of the Standing Committee on Science and Research. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format pursuant to House Order of June 23rd, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room, and also we have one member on Zoom this morning. Again, please recognize, address comments through the chair when you're speaking, and a reminder that when you're on Zoom, if you can be muted until you're speaking. Pursuant to Standing Order 108.3.1 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, February 14th, 2023, the committee commences its study on the Government of Canada's graduate scholarship and postdoctoral fellowship programs. It's my pleasure now to welcome our witnesses more formally. Anna Tunguzo, Vice President Acting of Government and Stakeholder Partnerships of the Colleges and Institutes Canada, and also from the University of Saskatchewan, Debbie Bertischen, Dean of the College of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies. You'll each be given a maximum of 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and after which we'll proceed to rounds of questions. I'll give you some signals when we're getting close to the time, or when we're over time, I'll ask you to wrap things up quickly. So I think we'll start with Anna Tunguzo. I hope I'm saying that rightly. Thank you. And for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Anna Tunguzo, and I'm Acting Vice President, Government and Stakeholder Partnerships at Colleges and Institutes Canada, or CICAN. Before I begin, I want to thank members of the committee for the opportunity to appear. I also want to acknowledge that I am speaking to you on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. CICAN represents over 140 colleges, cégeps, polytechnics, institutes, and, it may surprise you, 10 universities across Canada. We drive knowledge, we build capacity, and we advocate for the growth of our sector and the contributions we can make to the Canadian economy and Canadian society. In fact, tens of thousands of students at colleges contributed to applied research projects in 2019-20, an average of 6 per project, with many going on to roles where they directly or indirectly support research, both basic and applied, be it at institutions, in government, or in industry. Let me be very clear that CICAN is supportive of improving the amounts offered to promising scholars under the Canada Graduate Scholarship and Postdoctoral Fellowships Program. It is important that Canada keep pace with the increasing competition for talent and highly qualified personnel in science and research, both at colleges and universities. These awards have not seen an increase in about 2 decades, while inflation since then has reduced the real value of the awards by almost half. As a matter of both fairness and competitiveness, it is an imperative that the government act to correct the situation. A doctoral program involves years of intense study and high expectations. The Tri-Council currently asks students to take on this immense challenge on a stipend of either $21,000 or $35,000 per year, if at all. In contrast, in 2021, the median income in Canada was $68,400, and that is for students who are fortunate enough to receive one of these awards. With only a few thousand of these awards available, in contrast to about 280,000 graduate students studying in Canada, the conversation we are having today is a small subset of a broader issue.
I will use the remainder of my time to invite the committee to consider the role that colleges can play in promoting higher education and scholarship. Approximately 120 colleges in Canada are eligible for Tri-Council funding, and many have active applied research programs. Graduate students and postdoctoral fellows can play a role in supporting colleges' applied research while retaining the time to conduct and advance their own research. This expertise could be highly complementary to the expertise, equipment, and capacity that already exists in the nearly 700 college research centres and laboratories across Canada. Colleges are hiring more and more full-time researchers to support their growing applied research activities. It's a unique learning and educational environment with great potential for hosting graduate students on exchange with their home institutions, as well as postdoctoral fellows who are looking to both advance their own research and enhance their skills to be ready to work in industry. In fact, some colleges and cégeps already are doing this work. NSERC and the Tri-Council should consider how to ensure that graduate students and postdoctoral fellows are well supported in their research projects.
Than ever to examine the way we can bring the post-secondary sector more closely together. This is one such example of an innovative way we could contribute to that goal. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And now over to Debbie Burstin from the University of Saskatchewan, please. Ms. Burstin.
Good morning. Bonjour, Tanzi. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address this committee on an important topic for research trainees in Canada. I am Dean of the College of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies at the University of Saskatchewan, which is situated on Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis. I'm also President of the Western Canadian Deans of Graduate Studies. I'm here to recommend that the federal government work with the tri-agencies to address the erosion of the value of the scholarships and fellowships. As you well know, the dollar value of these has not risen since 2003. Staying within the current suite of programs, I would recommend the Canadian Graduate Master's Scholarship increase to at least $25,000, the Canadian Graduate Doctoral Scholarship to $45,000, the agency-specific scholarships to at least $35,000, or simply harmonize with the CGSD scholarships, and the Bantings to $90,000. As a point of comparison, according to Glassdoor, the average salary a fellow received last year was over $76,000 from the NRC. That indicates a Canadian market rate for postdocs in science, technology, engineering, and math. At the time the Vanier scholarships were introduced in 2008, the tax-exempt $50,000 was a boon to recruitment of international and domestic postdocs, outstanding ones. As well, the Banting Fellowships were competitive by international standards. The failure to keep pace with inflation means that these scholarships no longer hold the same prestige nationally or internationally. I want to fully recognize the increases that the tri-agencies have made in terms of the number of scholarships over the years, and most recently in terms of creating equity within the scholarship systems. And the committee has heard from a variety of stakeholders already, including students who have expressed the dire financial strains that they experience in general, from leaders of organizations of the universities and tri-agency leadership. What I appreciate is that the committee wants to hear about how we fund graduate students within the university. Offering competitive funding packages are vital to attracting and retaining graduate students and to prevent exploitation of early career researchers, full stop. So my central message here today is, in fact, that the national scholarship should lead and impact the baselines for student funding packages. We at the University of Saskatchewan are currently implementing some dramatic changes to our center graduate scholarship programs with a goal to bring every PhD student to a minimum of only $20,000 a year for 4 years. That $20,000 is reached through a combination of scholarship, stipends from grants, and academic employment as teaching assistants. Throughout the internal consultations, there was considerable pushback from faculty who have to manage their grants in terms of seeing those increases then leading to contractions of the research personnel. For doctoral students, many, if not most of our STEM programs already provide $25,000 to $30,000 a year, and our internal central scholarships are also in that range. In 21-22, at USask, graduate student financial support was just over $44 million. Of this, $2.9 million was directly from provincial funds, $7 million from industry and non-government organizations. Nearly one-third came from federal sources, $3 million of that in the graduate scholarships and $10 million through the grants, tri-agency grants. The other $22 million comes from the university itself. And I'll break that down. About a third comes through endowed scholarships, and the other 2/3, including $8 million that I administer through the College of Graduate Studies, is from the university's operating budget. The vast majority of that is provided in scholarships, with $5 million as academic employment. So to give you a sense of just how important increasing funding sits with graduate deans, we devoted our last Western Deans Conference to the topic. We had a keynote from an advancement professional on how graduate deans can better attract philanthropy, and discussions focused on sharing how to implement minimum funding guarantee policies within our organizations. And we also discussed a lot about what that livable income is for a graduate student. So to conclude, now is the time for new investment to raise the value of scholarships and fellowships. We need to prevent exploitation and promote equity. Training as a researcher should not be accessible only to those with independent wealth. We need to decrease the opportunity costs for those, including not wanting to take on added employment, external employment that delays their time in program and their entry ultimately into the workforce. And we need to maintain Canada's competitive position. The federal granting agency scholarships and fellowships should not be below the minimum funding packages currently offered at our Canadian research-intensive universities. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Burston, and I hope I'm saying that right. And you're okay, great, and you're right on time. Speaking of right on time, we'll go to the floor for questions for Dan Mazier for 6 minutes. Mr. Mazier, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the following motion, that pursuant to Standing Order 108.3.I, the committee study the use of federal government research and development grants, funds, and contributions by Canadian universities and research institutions in partnerships with entities connected to the People's Republic of China in areas including but not limited to photonics, artificial intelligence, quantum theory, biopharmaceuticals, and aerospace, and including but not limited to intellectual property transfers and developments with Huawei Technologies and the National University of Defence Technology. That the committee hear from the Director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Services, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, department officials, top research officials from Canadian universities, the federal granting agencies, and any other witnesses deemed relevant to the study. That the committee allocate a minimum of 10 meetings to the study and the committee report its findings to the House. End of motion. Mr. Chair, I know that this motion is interrupting today's study, and I apologize to the witnesses. I was concerned that I would not be able to move this motion prior to Parliament rising for the summer, so I am doing so now. I believe that it is an important motion that needs to be debated in public and not behind closed doors. Mr. Chair, this is a very serious matter, and it's a timely one that this committee needs to examine. The motion that I moved is regarding a topic that has gained significant media attention over the last few years, and in particular, over the last few months. This motion is not a partisan motion. It is not a political motion. It is a motion in the interest of research and development in Canada. Members of this committee may not be aware of the recent reports in the media, so I'll refer to them later in my remarks. I will also be reflecting on some of the testimony that was shared with this committee during our previous study on support of commercialization of intellectual property, because it reaffirms the urgency of the study. I will remind members of this committee what the mandate of the Standing Committee on Science and Research is. As a committee, we are responsible for studying all matters related to science and research. I see no other committee better suited to study this use of federal government research and development grants and contributions by the Canadian universities and research institutions than the Standing Committee on Science and Research. This committee has undertaken many studies that this motion would impact, including a study on support for commercialization of intellectual property, a study on successes, challenges, and opportunities for science in Canada, and a study on top talent research and innovation. Most of the time we examine research and development, we only hear about the good things associated with partnerships and funding agreements. But the reality is that there are matters threatening the future of research and development in Canada. And in order for the future where research and development can prosper in Canada, we as members of the Standing Committee on Science and Research have a study to study the roadblocks preventing and threatening that future prosperity. As reported by the Globe and Mail, and I quote, The Canadian Security Intelligence Service has publicly warned that Beijing is threatening Canada's national security and intellectual property in 5 sensitive areas of research and development, including quantum theory, photonics, artificial intelligence, biopharmaceuticals, and aerospace. That is why my motion specifically lists these areas. These areas were not flagged by me. They were flagged by our country's top securities officials. We also know that Canadian universities conducting joint research with Chinese military scientists. It was the Minister of Innovation who responded to the national security aspect of this matter, another reason why this matter should be studied at this committee. I will remind members of the statement given by the member of the government's own cabinet, and I quote, "I am looking to impose additional requirements when it comes to strengthening research security in Canada," end quote. That statement was not from a Minister of Public Safety, it was not from a Minister of National Defence, and it was not a Minister from Foreign Affairs. That statement was given by the Minister of Innovation. This further confirms that this motion is best suited to be studied at this committee and that should be supported by the Liberal members of this committee. But it hasn't only been Liberal members who have highlighted this pressing issue. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh commented on research that puts national security at risk too, as also reported in the Global Mail, and I quote, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh said open and collaborative research is fine in principle, but not when it puts national security at risk. Whenever there is a, quote, whenever there is a security concern and there is national security impact, then we should make decisions to protect our national security and Canadian safety and security, end quote. And he told reporters, I trust that the NDP will support this motion as well. I will remind members of this committee that a lot of information came to light during our last study on the support of commercialization of intellectual property regarding partnerships with Huawei technologies. Despite Huawei being banned from Canada's 5G network for security reasons, we learned that Huawei has been very involved in research partnerships in Canadian University. When I brought in a signed patent agreement between the University of British Columbia and Huawei Technologies to the attention of this committee on March 21st, 2023, Dr. Gail Murphy, the Vice President of Research and Innovation at the University of British Columbia, tried to dismiss these concerns by stating the following, and I quote, I will say that as research security guidelines have evolved with the federal government, we have been changing our agreements in the respect and have moved to new standards, end quote. But when I asked her if the University of British Columbia is still working with Huawei in any form, she stated, and I quote, yes, we do. It is very clear that the current measures that the government has taken are not effective. And therefore, this is another reason why, as a committee, we must study this issue and make recommendations to the government. Furthermore, on the same date, when I asked the Vice President of Research at the University of Calgary if they will continue to work with Huawei in any form, Mr. William Gali responded, and I quote, we don't at this time because of the guidance that has come to us through the bodies and I just mentioned, end quote.
Just, if I can interrupt at that point, how much longer are you going to take? And I'm wondering whether we should be excusing our witnesses if this is going to take all meetings.
Lots more.
I'm sorry?
That's totally up to you.
How much time do you think you need?
Well, rest of the meeting.
Okay, well, if we're going to be going to the rest of the meeting and you've got the floor, unfortunately to the witnesses and especially to Dr. Bertishin, who's come from Saskatchewan, unfortunately we're not going to be getting to your questions, and that's most unfortunate. Thank you for preparing to come to the meeting and
You're still welcome
for being
to stay,
here.
though.
But you're welcome to leave. Yeah, yeah, because this will be going on. It looks like there's something else going on.
Because they don't
here.
want to vote on
I
the motion.
apologize for that. And thank you again for your preparing for the meeting. Okay, back over to Mr. Major.
Furthermore, on the same date, when I asked the Vice President of Research at the University of Calgary if they continue to work with Huawei in any form, Mr. William Gali responded, and I quote, we don't at this time.
Pas actuellement, à cause des directives qui nous sont arrivées. Cependant, l'Université de Calgary n'a pas dit tout à ce comité Ils ont noté qu'ils ont...
Translation isn't working.
Sorry, we were on the wrong channel. I'm sorry.
They apologize. They're on the right channel now. Thank you to our translators.
I'm just helping you stall.
Thank you. In a letter signed by William Galley to this committee on May 9th, 2023, the following statement was made, and I quote, "When asked by Mr. Major, does U of Calgary continue to work with Huawei at this time? My response was no, because we are not at present embarking on any new project." What I overlooked in providing that answer was that there are 3 existing projects with Huawei established in prior years. Those 3 projects will not be interrupted by the university, end quote. I am personally troubled to know that the University of Calgary failed to provide accurate information to this committee in their initial response. It is quite troubling and should be examined. Because now we know that the question on whether they continue to work with Huawei is a no, but in fact, a yes. Furthermore, this committee received a written response from the University of British Columbia. This written response was to follow up on my question in a letter with the following statement was made, and I quote, "UBC's research agreements with Huawei Technologies Canada have evolved over time, reflecting guidance from federal partners," end quote. However, the 5-page letter mentions multiple partnerships with Huawei over the years. But it's not only the University of British Columbia or the University of Calgary who are actively working with Huawei. When Mr. Jim Hinton, an intellectual property lawyer, appeared at this committee, he stated the following, and I quote, "CSIS is actively monitoring Canadian research institutions for IP transfer and reviewing ties to the foreign government actors," end quote. He also stated, and I quote, that there is at least 20 Canadian universities that have been working with Huawei, end quote. He went on to say, and I quote, "Canadian universities are getting money. I think they've got around $3.34 billion in federal funding, and Huawei would be one of the beneficiaries of this funding. Huawei's been able to generate hundreds of patents out of Canadian universities over the years," end quote. When I asked him if the current government has done anything to guarantee that the government research funding is not being used to develop intellectual property for Huawei or for the entities that CSIS warned against, he stated, and I quote, "No, it is the opposite. There are incentive programs through NSERC to encourage Canadian universities to partner with organizations like Huawei. There's nothing stopping a researcher or a university from continuing to work with those organizations. As we've seen, they'll continue to do this unless somebody steps up and says that we need to reconsider this," end quote. This is a very serious matter. I would argue that this is the most pressing matter for this committee. Our top intelligence agency is sounding the alarm on this, and it appears that there is little being done to address this. I asked Dr. Chad Gaffield, the executive officer of the U15 group for Canadian Research Universities, how many of these universities he represents continue to work with Huawei after receiving briefings and warnings from CSIS. He failed to provide a clear answer. He said he did not have this information on hand. He failed to commit to provide this information to the committee when I asked him. I believe this committee deserves to know these answers, and I believe that we should pursue these answers. I will also draw to the committee's attention to recent reports that the University of Waterloo advised researchers that they aren't obligated to speak to CSIS.
Slow down and talk. Keep going.
See if they notice.
Keep going. Keep talking. Just slow down.
I'm just going to stop.
Keep going.
See if they notice.
Yeah. Keep talking.
Why would the University of Waterloo be advised researchers that they don't have to speak to our country's top security officials? This is a question that needs to be answered. I also want to draw to the committee's attention to the report that this was tabled in the House of Commons 2 weeks ago by the Special Committee on Canada's Republic of China relationship. In the report, there was an important recommendation that stated the following, and I quote, that the Government of Canada advise provincial governments as well as Canadian universities and research institutions about the threats from the People's Republic of China to national security and intellectual property. The advice should include explicit guidance against research partnerships and collaboration with universities, entities, and researchers from the People's Republic of China in the 5 sensitive areas identified by CSIS: artificial intelligence, quantum technology, 5G, biopharma, clean tech. The Government of Canada should also conduct ongoing research and provide resources to assist universities and research institutions in developing robust mechanisms to protect national security and intellectual property while respecting academic freedom and institutional autonomy." End quote. All MPs on this committee supported this. Furthermore, I will draw the committee's attention to Recommendation 6 in the same report. Recommendation 6 stated the following, and I quote, that the Government of Canada, through a ministerial policy directive, ban the federal granting councils from the funding research connected with universities, entities, and researchers from the PRC in 5 sensitive areas identified by CSIS. All MPs on the committee supported this too. I think it's extremely important that this committee studies this matter, hears from expert witnesses, and reports its finding to the House of Commons. It is timely, it is relevant, and it's important. No other committee is better suited to examine this specific issue to an extensive detail. And this specific issue deserves to be studied in detail. As a committee, I think it is extremely important that we hear from the Director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. I think it is important that we hear from the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, along with his department officials. And I think it's important that we hear from the top research officials from Canadian universities and the federal granting agencies, because this is a pressing matter impacting science and research in Canada. I will remind this committee that Mr. Hitton's testimony on the importance of looking into this matter. When he last appeared at the Standing Committee on Science and Research on April 18, 2022, he stated the following on the matter, and I quote, "If you look at the list of IP that is coming out of Canadian University, it's being assigned to organizations like Huawei. It's artificial intelligence, it's photonics, it's advanced processing. Somebody needs to understand this. We need to get to the bottom of this. There's a transparency issue here. We don't know who or what is being done with Canadian publicly funded research. And there are examples that we need to make sure that are not happening. There are policies in place, but the fox is in the charge of the henhouse. The researcher who wants to get the money is in the one checking the boxes to say that there's no issue here." End quote. I don't know how much louder the alarm needs to sound before the government takes this issue seriously. This is an issue that has been relevant for many years, and the significance and the importance of the study is only becoming more important. I'm going to quote an article published by the Globe and Mail on October 30th, 2018, entitled "Foreign Espionage of Canadian Research and Risk to National Interests, CSIS." The article reads as follows, and I quote, "Canada's Spy Service is warning that Canadian research is of interest to foreign states, whose exploitation of such work poses potential harm to Canada's national interests. The Canadian Security Intelligence Services said on Tuesday that it routinely meets with universities to warn them of risks. The Globe and Mail reported this week that at least 9 of the 9 Canadian post-secondary institutions have conducted joint studies in recent years with researchers from Chinese military institutions, including the People's Liberation Army, Information Engineering University, China's Air Defense College, and the elite National University of Defense Technology. In general, Canadian university policies require joint research to be published openly. The collaborations, however, have raised concern that Canadians' academic establishments have become a target for Chinese intelligence gathering, as Beijing conducts a sweeping technological modernization of its armed forces. Some Chinese defense scientists working with Canadian scholars have used the names of what appear to be non-existent civilian institutions rather than citing their military credentials in joint publications. Collaborative work with Canada has included advances in secure communications and satellite imaging processing technologies that have civilian and military value. A report this week by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute found 3 Canadian universities among the global top 10 in publishing joint research with Chinese military scholars. The Institute tabulated 687 academic papers co-authored by Canadian academics with Chinese defense researchers. Universities said federal authorities determined which foreign researchers are allowed into Canada. We rely on the Government of Canada to evaluate security considerations in offering study permits. University of Calgary spokesman Drew Sherburn said in a statement, the university is committed to academic freedom and does not regulate the areas of research pursued by its faculty or graduate students, he said. But the Canadian political establishment has had little to say about the issue, including the Minister of Public Safety, Ralph Goodale, who on Tuesday did not mention China or the Canadian universities, saying no response to a question in Ottawa that he would not discuss what he called operational details. We have organizations such as the RCMP and CSIS, our police and security organizations, that are very alert to the kind of risks that should threaten Canadians, and they take all the necessary steps to investigate those risks and make sure that Canadians are kept safe, Mr. Goodale said. Canadian Spy Agency, however, was more forthcoming. Universities are among the institutions CSIS routinely meets to advise them of potential threats to security and interest of Canada, to provide unclassified briefings regarding the nature of specific threats, spokesman John Townsend said in a statement. Canadian industry and academic institutions are world leaders in various economic, technological, and research sectors that are of the interest to foreign states. These states seek to acquire Canadian technology and expertise by utilizing a range of traditional and non-traditional intelligence collections tradecraft, he added. Such covert exploitation, he said, may come at the expense of Canada's national interests, including lost jobs and revenues and a diminished competitive global advantage. In the United States, the Department of Justice on Tuesday warned that Chinese intelligence agents used hackers and co-opted company insiders to pilfer aerospace industrial technologies. Several people referred to as Chinese intelligence officers and their conspirators were charged. The threat posed by Chinese government-sponsored hacking activity is real and relentless, John Brown, FBI agent in charge of San Diego field office, said in a statement. End of article. These are not my words. These are words of experts. I would also like to draw to the committee's attention an article published by the Globe and Mail on August 6, 2020, titled CSIS Warns About China's Efforts to Recruit Canadian Scientists. The article reads, and as follows, and I quote, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service has warned the country's universities and research institutions that Beijing is using academic recruitment programs such as its 1,000 Talents Plan to attract scientists to China in hopes of attaining cutting-edge science and technology for economic and military advantage. The Federal Spy Agency says that 1,000 Talents Plan, TTP, which Beijing created in 2008 to identify and recruit leading scientific experts around the globe, is an example of the way China is attempting to get academics to share, either willingly or by coercion, the results of work conducted and financed in Canada so that China doesn't have to rely on only traditional intelligence gathering. John Townsend, the head of CSIS Media Relations, said in a statement to the Globe and Mail that some countries looking to acquire sensitive Canadian technologies.
Read it again. Keep going.
John Townsend, the head of CSIS Media Relations, said in a statement to the Globe and Mail that some countries looking to acquire sensitive Canadian technologies and expertise use this non-traditional method of intelligence collections, recruiting academics who will provide what is a hostile state wants, or could be compelled to do so through offers of reward or through threats of punishment. Academic talent plans are one way to incentivize academics to participate in such activities. While Thousand Talents Plan is one example, they are used by multiple hostile states and other names. I just want to repeat that article again because this is a pretty important part of the whole motion. John Townsend, the head of CSIS Media Relations, said in a statement to the Globe and Mail that some countries looking to acquire sensitive Canadian technologies and expertise use this non-traditional method of intelligence collection, recruiting academics who will provide what a hostile state wants or could be compelled to do so through offers of reward or threat of punishment. I don't know if anybody got that. I'll read it again just in case no one got that. I didn't hear it. Read it again. Okay. John Townsend, the head of CSIS Media Relations, said in a statement to the Globe and Mail that some countries are looking to acquire sensitive Canadian technologies and expertise, use this non-traditional method of intelligence collections, recruiting academics who will provide what hostile state wants or could be compelled to do so through offers of reward or threat of punishment. Academic talent plans are one way to incentivize academics to participate in such activities. While the 10,000 Talents Plan is one example, academic talent plans are used by multiple hostile states and other names. I'll read that again. Academic talent plans are one way to incentivize academics to participate in such activities. While the 1,000 Talents Plan is one example, academic talent plans are used by multiple hostile states by other names. Mr. Townsend was replying to a question from the Globe about whether CSIS has national security concerns over 1,000 Talents Plan, which recently has become the focus of scrutiny for the U.S. law enforcement and Congress. He said CSIS has spoken to universities and other research institutions about its concerns over this and other foreign recruitment programs after evidence of technological transfer emerged in recent years. The Globe has found at least 15 Canadian academics who have participated in the Chinese program, including experts in quantum computing, advanced electronics and engineering, vaccines, chemistry, and artificial intelligence. All the scholars contacted by the Globe defended the program as mutually beneficial for Canada and China and said they did not encounter any untoward conduct during the involvement. The Chinese program provides salaries, research funds, lab space at universities in China, and other incentives. A 2016 report by the Conference Board of Canada said that TTP funding can be as high as $335,000 for a startup, plus up to $168,000 in remuneration per annum. International professors also receive preferential treatment in terms of medical care, housing for foreign nationals, permanent residency, and multi-entry visas, the report said. China stopped publishing the names of people who have participated in the program since September 2018 after the U.S. Justice Department began investigating allegations that some scientists illicitly provided China with technology and a high-level research funded by U.S. federal agency. I think this is probably the most alarming thing of this, Chair. That China, and I'll repeat this so everybody hears this, China stopped publishing the names of people who have participated in the program in September 2018 after the U.S. Justice Department began investigating allegations that some scientists illicitly provided China with technology, high-level research funded by U.S. federal agencies. In November 2019, the U.S. Senate report, Threats to the U.S. Research Enterprise, China's Talent Recruitment Plans, described the Chinese program as a campaign to recruit talent and foreign experts to benefit China's economic and military development. The Senate report says that participants in the 1,000 Talents Plan are asked to sign contracts that require them not to disclose that Chinese institutions will retain the rights to at least some of the intellectual property created by the U.S. researchers. This is what everybody's not talking about. The contracts can incentivize members to lie about their participation in TTP on grant applications to U.S. grant-making agencies, set up shadow labs in China, working on research identical to their U.S. research, and in some cases transfer U.S. scientists hard-earned intellectual capital, the Senate report said. The report estimated that China has more than 200 economic recruitment programs. CSIS, Mr. Townsend said that underhanded efforts to acquire sensitive Canadian technologies and expertise hurt Canada. These corrosive tactics, which are done to advance the economic and strategic objectives of hostile states, come at the expense of Canada's national interest, including lost jobs, revenue for public services, and a diminished competitive global advantage, Mr. Townsend said. While I cannot discuss specific investigation, I can say that CSIS actively investigates all threats of foreign interference and espionage. Canada's spy agency warned in May that Canadian academics and corporations are at increased risk of espionage or intellectual property theft as agents of China and Russia target research related to COVID-19. Canadian academics say their 1,000 talents work in China can benefit Canada, helping them identify top Chinese graduate students who can be recruited to come here at the expense of their own government and contribute to science research. Andres Melendez, professor of research at the University of Toronto, Department of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering, enlisted as a 1,000 talent scholar with the University of Electronic Science and Technological of China in Chengdu from 2013 to 2018. He helped build a laboratory there and mirrored facilities at the University of Toronto. He still visits accommodation and travel expenses paid to meet and collaborate with scholars.
Pass the floor.
Pass the floor to Professor Mendelis said academics are treated exceptionally well in China. I will now pass the floor over to fellow MP.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mazer. Fellow colleagues.
Sorry, I'll just recognize Mr. Talker had his hand up.
Yeah.
So you're wanting to interrupt proceedings. Is it a point of order, or what would you like to suggest?
No, not a point of order.
Okay.
You hand it over to the floor.
Okay.
So this is a very pressing study, but we have also some very pressing studies that we're working on right now. I'd like to amend the motion to not 10 meetings, but down to 6 meetings, and for it to start on June 20th meeting, the Tuesday, the last week of session. So I move that amendment to Mr. Mazer's motion now be debated.
We have a motion on the floor?
Motion on the floor to amend Mr. Mazer's proposed study to start now on June 20th, not immediately, but on June 20th, and that it would be for 6 meetings.
Debate. Richard.
Yeah, I would just like to add, and this may be, I haven't looked at the number of meetings and the number of hours we have and what we have on our plate, but I would just like to make sure that the studies that we have now underway, this one that we're dealing with today, and the 2 that we have reports written for, I think there's 2. There's the French one and the citizen science one. Anyways, I would just like to make sure that those are all done and dusted before we jump into this. And there may well be enough time to do that with the calendar. And I don't know if we can, if I need to put forward an amendment to that effect, but that would be what I'd like to see happen. I don't want to start this one before those have been finished and presented to the House. That's all.
Okay. Mr. Tucker.
I view that as a friendly amendment that the other studies will be completed before this starts on June 20th.
Pending the information is there for it.
Okay, Mr. Cole.
I thought we already had a motion that the next study was on the books, that the next study was going to be the pay equity one.
That's correct. We do have a motion on the table that has been adopted that the pay equity study is our next study. Ms. Bradford?
And I believe witnesses have already been contacted and lined up for that.
Just over to the clerk, I believe we do have witnesses.
Yes, invitations have been sent for the next meeting, which is next week.
So it was to start next week, right?
It was due to start next week based on the calendar that was distributed.
And the calendar came to us through the subcommittee and then adopted by the committee as a calendar that we would be working under so that the clerk could do her work. Mr. Tucker.
So that being said, the pressing nature of involvement of Beijing in our universities, I think, takes precedence. And I believe that we should be studying this on the 20th. And that is the nature of why we're debating this today, is because the urgency of this. And I would call a vote on the amended motion that I put forward with Mr. Canning's caveat that we wrap up the studies that are waiting for reports.
We can't call the vote until we finish discussion. If there isn't any further discussion, we could ask for a vote. Mr. Cannings?
Yeah, and the other consideration I think here is, we have developed this procedure of rotating studies through the parties, and I'm aware that Ms. Bradford's study was to be the next.
Yep.
And I just want to make sure that if we do this, that is reflected in how we time the next studies. The Conservatives would not have their next one. And I don't know, since I think it's a bit early if we have already started the proceedings of inviting witnesses and all that for the next meeting, we should get that going. I don't want to waste a meeting in that regard. But again, and I must admit, I wasn't thinking of. I didn't think of Ms. Bradford's study when I was talking with Mr. Tucker about that, and so I would rather we at least get that started. But again, I want to make sure we finish the other ones, and I don't want to end up wasting time. I think Ms. Bradford's study is just as pressing as this one, and I frankly don't see the emergency nature of this study. I think it's something that we should take on, but
Okay, I'm just.
under the threat of filibustering until the end of June, I'm happy to negotiate, but I just want to make sure that things are set down in a fair way after this, so that that tradition is kept up.
Thank you. And I've got a speaking list starting here. We've got Ms. Medledge Diab with her hand up online, and then we'll go to Mr. Tucker. And I may need to consult the clerk once we've had a little bit of discussion here in terms of what our options may be going forward that I could bring back.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not exactly sure what the options are, what's happening, but I do want to say the following. Because I was obviously involved, so were other members of the committee when the topic of the pay equity came up last time before we decided to put another one in front of it, although we thought it was supposed to go before the other one. So I, in no uncertain terms, would be willing to let that go. I just want that on record. I think we had all agreed on this committee that that would be the next. Now, failing any catastrophe, and forgive me, folks, I am in my riding of Halifax West, where we are dealing with wildfires that are running and they're not under control. I've got thousands of people evacuated. I've got thousands of others that have been put on 30-minute notice to be evacuated. I'm emotional. Things are a bit tense. But with respect to the motion and the study that is supposed to come next, I will not agree to let another one go before that one. That's all I'm going to say.
To Mr. Tucker, please.
I think there's a solution on here is that the study with the amendments we made start on the June 20th, but we do both studies at the same time. So the pay equity does not get pushed back. The other reports get finished up before the 20th, and we don't change the witnesses that got invited for next week. So witnesses aren't wasting their time. We still study, we can do two studies at the same time, and that's what I would like to amend my motion even further to say on June 20th that both studies continue the Beijing influence and the pay equity.
Okay, I think because we're doing this on the fly, I'd like to consult with the clerk for a few minutes, and maybe if you need to talk amongst yourselves, let's take 5 minutes to just see where we're at in terms of our schedule going forward. Again, reminding us that we did have a schedule that we were working under, but if there's a change that needs to be made, how we go about that. So let's suspend for 5 minutes, and we'll see you back at 12. Lots of conversations, but if we can pull them back to the table now. I've got a couple of points that I've discussed with the clerk, and thanks to the clerk for her support on where we're at. We have an amendment on the floor which we have to have reintroduced because the mover of an amendment can't, or motion can't amend their own motion. We'll come back to that. We do have witnesses scheduled for next week, and so that's just for information. Next week is, and this motion would give us some freedom around that. We've lost at least 1 hour today. We may be able to get some testimony depending on how the rest of this meeting goes. We might be able to get our witnesses to give us testimony today. We haven't been able to get questions to our first panel, and we could ask our first panel questions. They've actually offered to answer any questions that we want to give them in writing, that they'll respond to us in writing. And so we've got 2 hours on the 13th that we were scheduled to wrap up this study, and we'll have to see again if we're able to recover the at least witness testimony for today. Then we may be able to wrap up this study on the 13th, if depending on how this meeting goes. So I've got a couple of hands up, and I think there was a question right as I was suspending about the speaking order. The speaking order is, for the first round, was leading off with Dan Mazur, Chad Collins, Maxime Blachek, Jocasse, and Richard Cannings. We could maintain that speaking order since we didn't get to it. If Mr. Mazur was wanting to be first up, or the next, we can deal with that. The second round was going to be led by Mr. Lobb. So if we get to the second round, we'll talk about that just before we get started of where we want to pick up our speaking order. So with all of those things on the table, is there an amendment? First of all, we've got Mr. Lobb had his hand up, and then we had Mr. Collins on the speaking list so far. So Mr. Lobb, what did you want to tell us or ask us?
Mr. Chair, there's a lot I want to tell you, but I think I'll just keep it to this for now. This is an amendment on Mr. Tucker's motion.
Okay.
All right. I hope the committee finds this well. And the amendment reads that the future meeting be split between pay equity and the Beijing interference, with Beijing interference taking the first hour of each meeting and the pay equity the subsequent hour to conclude each meeting. So that's the amendment.
Starting on the 20th. And so the rest of the motion stays as is, and then you're just adding that to the motion.
Yeah.
Discussion, Mr. Collins?
Yeah, I was going to amend that to that we get the first hour and the second hour be dedicated to the motion that's been put, the study that's been put. I'd also like the motion with the amendment in writing, if I could.
Okay, well, it doesn't sound like that's going to be accepted, so we're going to have to start doing some debates on the amendment and then get to the, we'll follow the procedure on amendments.
We have to start at the bottom and work our way up.
So which one's first?
Splitting.
I'm sorry?
Splitting the, so.
So the amendment that Mr. Lobb's just put forward is the first one up for discussion, and I think you were just starting that discussion. And you've made your comments? Is there any?
Get everybody back at the table first.
So let's start while there's a discussion going on with Mr. Cannings and Mr. Tucker. First, let's go to the motion. and then the amendment.
Other way around, you gotta.
Well, I was going to read the motion and then the amendment, and then we can start going on the amendment. So what do we have for the motion?
The main motion first page you read.
Oh, you want it? I can read it again. Ready?
Yep.
That pursuant to Standing Order 108-3I, the committee studied the use of federal government research and development grants, funds, and contributions by the Canadian universities and research institutions in partnerships with entities connected to the People's Republic of China in areas including but not limited to photonics, artificial intelligence, quantum theory, biopharmaceuticals, and aerospace, and including but not limited to intellectual property transfers and developments with Huawei Technologies and the National University of Defense Technology. That the committee hear from the Director of Canadian Security Intelligence Service, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, department officials, top research officials from Canadian universities, the federal granting agencies, and any other witnesses deemed relevant to the study. That the committee allocate a minimum of 10 meetings to the study, and that the committee report its findings to the House. End of motion. Did you want me to repeat it again?
That's great, thank you. And then, Mr. Lobb, what's your addition to that, please?
I think it was first my amendment to that motion.
Right.
And then
Oh,
Ben's.
sorry, that's why I'm doing this, is to
Yes.
try and get it sorted.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Tucker.
To amend the motion to 6 meetings instead of 10, and that it would, the study would start on June 20th.
Okay. And then over to Mr. Lobb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And would you like me to read the amendment to the amendment to the motion now?
Yep.
Okay, I'd be pleased to do that. That the future meetings be split between pay equity and Beijing interference, with Beijing interference taking the first hour of each meeting.
And Mr. Collins.
Yeah, if I
think
could on
we-
that, we're making a lot of concessions here as it relates to what the anticipated calendar was supposed to be for this committee. So, certainly respect the right of members opposite to put the motion that they've put today. But I think it's important to understand where we were in terms of process and what the committee has already decided. So, Mr. Chair, just based on Member Lobb's last motion, I would again reiterate my position would be that we dedicate the first hour to the pay equity. We'll start with that, and I would have other amendments to put to the other amendments and the main motion at a later
So
time.
that sounds to me like another amendment. Yeah, we'll have to deal with this first and then take another amendment. So if we can get these amendments in writing, so the clerk has that, would be appreciated. Mr. Lobb, if you have that in writing.
Just for ease of use, could we ask the analysts to quickly type that up? They have their Surface Pros open and able to print, and probably would be the most efficient way, if that's acceptable
It's
with the
actually,
clerk.
it's on the clerk, but I'm just trying to get, because we're doing this on the fly. We started with a motion that we did have a notice of motion, so it is in order to discuss, because we did have 48 hours notice, and now we are going to the amendments on those motions. Those amendments we don't have in writing yet. Okay, so we'll suspend for a couple of minutes so that she can get up to speed with those, what we just read into the record. We'll make sure that we have those in writing. So we'll get back together at 12:15. just still waiting for the written translation to come back, which we have submitted mid-meeting, so the services are trying to keep up. But in the meantime, I'll read the motions, or the amendment and the sub-amendment. I'll read into the record. I have them in writing in front of me, and then we can go back to the debate on the sub-amendment. So the amendment that we have that we've submitted to translation reads that the committee allocate a minimum of 6 full meetings to this study, that the committee begin the study on June 20th. And the sub-amendment says that the committee split the meetings for this study with the study of long-term impacts of pay gaps experienced by different genders and equity-seeking groups among faculty at Canadian universities, with this study being dedicated to the first hour. So that's what I have in writing in front of us now. We've kind of sorted through the clouds. Mr. Collins.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I was just going to start with, we have a little bit of a trust issue with what happened here today. And so I certainly understand, the jockeying in terms of whose study is first on the agenda for whatever day we're talking about. And I just used this morning's meeting as an example. I think it's the first time it's happened here at this committee. It certainly has happened elsewhere. And so it's not, unfortunately, it's not unique to this place, but it is unique to our committee. So I'm having a little bit of an issue with what's been presented, knowing that hasn't happened on this side of the table. I think this committee's worked very well through all studies. I think we've done a fairly good job in terms of respecting the order of studies, the length of studies, even the debate. I don't think the debate at any point in time has necessitated the chair intervening and calling, some order to the meeting. And so I understand the motivation behind the amendment that's been put, but I think if we look at the history of where this committee's been with decorum, if you want to call it that, I think we've been in a good place almost from our inception. So that's what causes me some consternation in terms of moving ahead with first hour, other study, second hour, our study, knowing, what transpired here today. I almost feel like putting a motion that we apologize to the witnesses that were supposed to appear today, because, I think one of the witnesses traveled almost halfway across the country to be here today. And while I can certainly reach out with my own personal communication and send my messages to them, with what happened here again this morning, not unique to this place, unfortunately, as I've learned in my year and a half here, but unfortunate. So that's what's causing me some consternation, and that's why I was going to move the amendment to the sub-amendment that ours continue with having some precedence on the order of the agenda, in light of the fact that we already have our study on the books. And today's motion is certainly trying to take priority, I think, in the study order. This isn't the normal course of business that we're accustomed to. And so with the precedent that was set today, with some of the actions that were taken to interfere with the study it's ongoing, I have great trouble supporting what's been put in front of the committee right now. So I don't know formally, from a procedural perspective, I can turn to you or the clerk, Mr. Chair, to understand whether, if we'd like to see something different than what's been presented, do we defeat that, and in lieu of that then create a motion, or do I sub-amend the amendment that's been put already to the committee?
We're not able to sub-amend the sub-amendment.
So we would
We'd have to
defeat what's
defeat
in
the
front of us,
sub-amendment and then introduce a new sub-amendment.
Thank you very much. Those are my comments on that issue.
Mr. Tucker?
Just for clarification, we can amend, my colleague Gerald could amend the motion. That's still allowed. He can amend this, and I'll defer to the clerk on the explanation on amendment.
Explanation.
Yes, just one moment, okay?
As she prepares, Chad, we can find ways.
Okay.
We're not in camera, sorry.
I apologize. So I did make a small minor. a mistake. We do need to defeat this first in order to move another sub-amendment on this. We cannot amend the sub-amendment work at the...
I would propose that we approve it and then amend the motion after it's passed. That would get us to the same spot, and the amended motion would help Mr. Collins'
I think
confidence.
Once you've approved the sub-amendment, it's approved. You can't go back and defeat it again. So it would have to be.
We're not defeating it. We're just amending it. We'll do it following it. The vote. We'll put the motion forward.
We need to.
Or even allow Chad, if he moves a motion that satisfies his caucus, that there's not going to be any filibustering and games in future meetings. We'll vote for that motion that you put forward.
I'll just wait for the clerk to weigh in. My understanding is that we would, once a sub-amendment is on the floor, it has to be dealt with. And if it looks like the committee could accept the sub-amendment, or the committee could reject the sub-amendment. If the committee rejects the sub-amendment, knowing that another one is coming, then it could be withdrawn. You could.
Mr. Chair, so I just confirmed it would be, even if it does pass, you can amend, it will then become one amendment, and you can amend it further. So you could have a new sub-amendment if it passes. So either way,
then you still have the main motion that could be amended. Yeah. Okay.
We have second.
Another option is with unanimous consent, you can withdraw the amendment, sub-amendment, and move another.
Yes, Mr. Tucker?
I would ask for a vote on the amendment, and then once that sub-amendment passes, we will, on debate on the main motion, put forward an amendment that will satisfy the Liberals' concerns about the order of meetings. And we would, as a gesture, reduce it from 6 to 5, as discussed offline. So I'd call the vote.
Is there any further discussion on the sub-amendment? Yes, Mr. Lauzon.
Si on arrêtait tantôt, là.
If we stopped earlier, it's because we wanted to have a written version of the motion that was tabled with the amendment. So imagine that if these discussions had all occurred in French, and that you had all of the exchanges, we can have the interpretation, but even interpreters said that it's not easy to follow when we don't have the text, or they don't have the text, rather. So all I asked for in the beginning was to have the written version, to have the translation of it, and to have the time to look at it in my own language of work before taking any decisions. Now what we're doing is, and what's been going on since the beginning here, in fact, is that we have just broken down the chemistry of the committee that we've had since the beginning, which is to say that we respected a certain order that had been established. We were respecting the rounds for questioning, and I'm not necessarily happy with the first procedures that we set up. Sometimes I want to intervene, and I can't because there's the rotation between the Conservatives, Liberal, NPT, and the Bloc, but also I have to let my colleagues speak. So every time that the NDP and the Bloc intervene, I only have one opportunity out of the 4 members here to intervene and participate in each discussion, and I've respected that from the outset. We've already had a good discussion with Maxime Blanchet-Jonca and myself on the fact that we did respect this and we didn't want to change the routine that we've had. And now what we've experienced here today, in fact, Mr. Chairman, is that everything has been upset. And the trust now, I can understand that it comes from the order of the whip, but I can understand the game that's going to be played here with this filibuster. I can understand that the motion is against doing a study, we had a very good opportunity to wrap up the study, but now there has been a lack of respect for the witnesses who came here today, and I'm astonished. In our committee, I never thought I'd see that here. To send away a witness, someone who's come halfway across Canada, on a study that's as important as this one is. And that has just compromised the study, the report, the end of the study for French in research. That really affects me, and it's because we have already see that there'll be a filibuster to the end if we don't get to where we want to go. But this, not finishing the study, is a direct attack on the French language. We wanted to finish this. We're almost at the end of it. And on top of disrespecting the witnesses, what happened is the trust that's been broken in all of this. We can't move ahead until we can at least sit down and see the motion and all of the amendments. Now we're on the third amendment, and we're talking about a fourth amendment following the adoption of this. And listen, for today, what I would prefer is that we just back up a little, read the motion, discuss it, that the Conservatives discuss, that the other opposition parties discuss it as well, and that we also have the opportunity to do so, and that we come back with a strategy. And perhaps that we come back on the basis that we had beforehand, the basis that we had in this committee. And I know, Mr. Chairman, you haven't been there too long, but you fit so nicely into the mold of what was happening before with the committee, and today we are very surprised by what has happened. So what I propose now is that we adjourn the meeting and that we look at the motion in English and in French and come back next Tuesday having carefully thought this over, each one of the parties. So I move that we adjourn today's committee meeting to come back later.
We have a dilatory motion on the table. He's just moved to adjourn, so there is no discussion on that. We'll go to the vote on the dilatory motion. Want a recorded vote?
Just point of order. Before that motion was put forward to adjourn, I would ask you to, through the clerk, ask that we not just sit to 1:30 today, but because we were suspended to over 50 minutes, that we would sit until 1:50.
No.
So to ask for additional services.
Unfortunately,
No.
that's part
We
of the
have a
debate.
motion on the floor.
Alina, please, it's up to the chair. No, it's a dilatory motion that's on the table, so we either have a recorded vote or we have a unanimous consent. Should we go to recorded vote?
To adjourn. You need unanimous support. To adjourn.
Not on motion to adjourn. It's a recorded vote. So let's go to the clerk, if you can help us with the recorded vote.
On the motion of Monsieur Lauzon to adjourn, Ms. Bradford. Mr. Collins. Madame Diab.
Oui.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Oui.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Mr. Lobb.
Well, with 90 seconds left, I'll say no.
Mr. Major.
No.
Mr. Soroka.
No.
Mr. Toker.
No.
Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca.
No.
Mr. Cannings.
No.
Okay, so the meeting continues. And Mr. Lobb?
Speak orders.
Mr. Lobb had his hand up.
The only thing I'll say to Mr. Lauzon, and I have full respect for him, there's no question about it. The 2 points I'll make, though, first one is just, and maybe we can have our clerks and analysts go back and look at this, but I think the past practice on an amendment is that it doesn't actually, at a committee on a motion, I don't believe it has to be translated and put onto paper or onto a digital format. I believe reading it aloud, if the chair that would be perfectly acceptable. Going above and beyond is fine, but I do believe that is past practice.
The standing order.
And just the other point I will make is I brought an issue up a few meetings ago in public, so I'm not saying anything out of order here, about my displeasure with the way the committee had gone on the format of a subcommittee. I didn't feel like that was inclusive to all, and that's just my opinion. It's nothing against Mr. Lauzon. And he basically said, too bad. If you want to do it, go to the subcommittee. Well, I'm not invited to the subcommittee anyways. So I'm not saying that spoiled the feeling in the committee, because I didn't take offense to it. It was his point, which is fine. That's all I'm going to say. So there is give and take. It is June. I'm not always in favor of all this stuff myself, but it is what it is, and that's the way Parliament works. So I guess we'll keep going.
Okay, quick comment from the chair that we do have standing orders of the committee that the committee adopted at the very beginning of the committee on if people are requesting things in writing, they're able to do that. And we also had the standard procedures of the committee were agreed on at the beginning of the committee, which also included subcommittees. So, Ms. Bradford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a lot of concern and disappointment with what has happened at our committee today. The agenda was to devote 2 hours to our study on Canada's graduate scholarship and postdoctoral fellowship programs. 2 panel of witnesses were called, and before one question was asked for the first panel, one witness traveled all the way from Saskatchewan to testify. Our meeting was hijacked by Conservative member Mazier, who proceeded to filibuster the meeting, bringing forward a motion regarding a subject that has been and is currently being studied at other parliamentary committees. The Conservatives wish to push back the already agreed-to study on the impacts of the gender and diversity pay gap for faculty at Canadian universities. We fought hard to get the committee to agree to this study, this next important topic, and the witnesses have been lined up to commence next Thursday. Tuesday is dedicated in our calendar to deal with finishing up reports on French language and research and citizen science. I would like to point out that the composition of our inaugural Science and Research Parliamentary Committee consists of 12 members, only 2 of which are female. Not only are the Conservatives insisting on ending the agreed-to order of studies, they are suggesting splitting the time of the meetings, with their study occupying the first hour and the pay equity study going second. My concern is, given the pattern of filibustering that was demonstrated by the Conservative opposition members at today's meeting and the disrespect shown to the witnesses, I have no assurance that they would not exhibit similar behavior going forward and filibuster the second hour of the pay equity study, which then in fact would not occur, and those witnesses as well would be disrespected and dismissed. This is not how our committee is supposed to work. We are sent here by our constituents to accomplish things and do important work. We rely on witnesses to provide expert testimony in order to help us arrive at logical, agreed-to conclusions and recommendations. These tactics exhibited by the Conservatives today precluded that from being accomplished today. And Member Toker has already indicated that if we do not accede to their wishes, the entire month of June until we rise, will proceed in this fashion. That was actually said. These conditions are not conducive to compromise.
Thank you, Ms. Bradford. We have other comments. Mr. Tucker.
So, Chair, just a clarification. So we are now debating the amendment to the motion, correct? The sub-amendment. So once we're done debate, we'll have a vote on that sub-amendment.
Correct.
Okay. No debate.
Any further debate on the sub-amendment? Seeing none,
No.
maybe we can go to the vote on the sub-amendment. Yes, the sub-amendment, just to make sure I've got it right, the sub-amendment is that the committee split the meetings for this study with the study of long-term impacts of pay gaps experienced by different genders and equity-seeking groups among faculty at Canadian universities, with this study being dedicated in the first hour.
Do you want a recorded vote?
A recorded vote? Yes, I see nods around the table.
Okay. We'll have a recorded vote on the sub-amendment amending the amendment by Mr. Tucker. Ms. Bradford?
No.
Mr. Collins?
Nope.
Ms. Diab?
No.
Monsieur Lauzon? No. Mr. Souza?
Which motion is this?
It's a sub-amendment.
His amendment?
No.
That's your
It's your-
sub-amendment.
it's yours.
I've read it into the record already.
Mr. Lobb?
Oui.
Mr. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Soroka?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca?
Oui.
Mr. Cannings?
Yes.
Okay, so the sub-amendment has passed. And now we go to the amendment. The amendment is, and then we'll go to the main motion. So the amendment is, and the amendment has been circulated in both languages. And it is that the committee allocated a minimum of 6 full meetings to this study and that the committee begin the study on June 20th. Discussion on the amendment. Okay, I don't see any hands. Oh, Mr. Collins.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You know, I think this issue is being studied at several committees. I'm not aware of all the studies, but as I understand it, it either has been studied elsewhere or is in the process of being studied elsewhere. I'm not certain whether we have that information in hand. Is it possible to understand where? And it doesn't look like the clerk knows, but look. What I've learned here again in a year and a half is that we spin our wheels a lot. Instead of moving on to studies where we're going to yield some benefit, we did this with the small modular reactors, right? We had precedents there. We've done that with 2 other studies since. I'd rather be on to new and different things to learn how to move legislation forward and look at financial investments that can be made in subject areas that are new to the committee and may possibly be new to the government. So with the recommendation that we have in front of us in terms of the 6 meetings, I would certainly like to suggest, in light of the fact that there's some overlap here with what's being studied elsewhere, that we look at a different number as it relates to what's being presented in terms of number of meetings, and I would suggest 4 meetings maybe as a compromise, Mr. Chair, if you would entertain that.
So we have a motion to amend the amendment, to sub-amend the amendment to 4 meetings from 6 meetings. Discussion on this
motion?
Discussion on the sub-amendment?
I will even agree to a further reduction to 4, but I would like Mr. Collins to withdraw his motion. We'll vote on the motion, the main motion, and then amend it after it's passed down to 4. If Mr. Collins is in agreement, he'll remove his motion, or we can vote on it.
No,
Oh, no, he can't remove his motion?
Oh, he can remove his motion, but he can remove his motion, but once the motion is adopted, that's the adopted motion. At the top.
And then we can amend that motion.
the main motion would then be discussed, and at the point of a main motion being discussed, you could suggest further.
At that
For ease
point-
of time, if this, oh, sorry.
At that point, it's the will of the committee if it's adopted, the final motion.
Once a motion has been adopted, and what you're
Now-
saying is getting rid of sub-amendments and then going to the main motion, if I'm understanding you correctly?
No, I'll just clarify. With unanimous support, we can amend a motion after it gets passed. So that can happen. But if to get this committee, as much as I think it's been functioning well, to get back to a place of respect, I will take further down to 4 on that recommendation or the amendment, as long as we have a vote on the main motion shortly. So after the adoption of this motion, I would expect that we would proceed with the other votes, with recorded votes.
Well, it's up to the will of the committee where we want to go. So if there's further discussion on the sub-amendment?
just a gentleman's agreement.
Yes, Mr.
You know, I'm
Collins.
just going to use Mr. Tucker's words in terms of getting the committee back on track. I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier. There's a big trust issue now that we have here. You know, this morning's proceedings were interrupted with the filibuster. We had 4 witnesses planned. Obviously, this meeting is off track, to use that term, because of what happened earlier. And so there's a trust issue here. You know, there's this trust us issue, and yet we're dealing in this political environment here of an element of political blackmail, right? In terms of we're going to keep filibustering, we're going to interrupt all proceedings, we're going to interrupt the report that was coming from our bloc friends, we're going to interrupt the report that's been done on the citizen science from our NDP member, and so it was threatened to bring everything to a grinding halt with the filibuster that we had earlier, and you know, if you agree with everything we say, then we'll stop. And so I just find it absurd. I again, not new to this place, but new to this committee. And so I have, you know, there's a trust issue here in terms of, you know, let this pass, and things will proceed as one party wants around the table instead of a collective decision-making process that has worked very well for this committee since its inception. And so I'm a little bit disturbed about, you know, because we acquiesce here on this one, and I guess the question would be, what's next? You know, something come again next week where somebody puts a motion or we have an established rule of order of business, and it's, well, we're not happy, and so we're going to run the clock out. And again, it's back to witnesses who've come in from different parts of the country. One thing for people to attend virtually and say, hey, look, we're going to have to interrupt your day. You know, go back to what you're doing. Sorry for the prep work that you did for this committee, but we'll call you when needed again. Might be a couple of days, could be a couple of weeks, depending on what's happened. And so, you know, it gives me some consternation in terms of this whole trust me line that's been presented to the committee, when in fact we've had a very good working relationship up until today's meeting. And what's changed, you know, I certainly understand the whole Chinese interference issue that's been raised in the House and at several committees. If that's the one-trick pony political debate that's going to happen for several months from one party, so be it. That's their prerogative. I guess the issue that I would have again is that it interferes with all the good work that this committee has done to date and continues to do up until this morning. And so I have some doubts in terms of what comes next if I agree to what's been suggested here, and I would much prefer, Mr. Chair, that the committee have some discussion about coming to a compromise rather than being politically blackmailed into a decision or a position that we're uncomfortable with.
And I think as the chair, I'm disappointed that the committee, the trust has been broken within the committee, and I hope that the committee can find a way to regain that trust. And it was working very well. And as a chair, it did make life move along because we were able to get some reports done and studied, and we have one that we'll be tabling in the House of Commons on Tuesday. I was hoping we'd see some more committee reports being tabled in the House of Commons, which has been a hallmark of this committee, was getting reports done. And so I'm hoping that we can get to the point where we can see reports being completed again. But it is the will of the committee to see where we go on the next steps. Now, I've heard 4 weeks on both sides talking on the sub-amendment. I wonder whether we can be voting on the sub-amendment to see whether we've got some common ground on that. And then we can go back to the main motion, main amendment, and see where we're at on that. So if we could, looking around the room, if there's no further discussion on the sub-amendment, the way that it sits now, let's go to the vote. Recorded division, or recorded vote.
On the sub-amendment of Mr. Collins, Ms. Bradford?
Oh,
sorry.
Sorry. Mr. Collins' sub-amendment, what we're voting on is the 4 weeks, and that's what we have on the table, and we'll go back to the amendment. Okay. So we're voting on 4 weeks as the study period. So recorded.
Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Joe Harry is joined us.
Yes.
He's
Yes.
He's subbing in.
I'm like.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, Mr. Jawari.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Sarai.
Yes.
Mr. Souza. Mr. Loeb. Mr. Major. Mr. Soroka. Mr. Tucker. Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca.
Oui.
Mr. Cannings.
Yes.
Okay, so that sub-amendment then passes. So back to where we're at with this. It's a good thing to have these things in writing. So now the sub-amendment reads that the committee split the meetings, or I'm sorry, the committee allocate a minimum of 4 full meetings to this study, that the committee begin the study on June 20th. So if we can vote on that full part of that full amendment, or discuss it. Please.
Break for a minute. What? Is there an issue with breaking for a minute?
Yeah, I think if we don't have a discussion on this, I think we're in the process of starting a vote. So let's keep going with the vote then.
Shall the motion of Dan Major as amended be adopted? Ms. Bradford.
And then, just to be clear, this will take us back to the main motion, and then if there's more discussion on the main motion, we can do it. So this is the amendment that the committee allocate a minimum of 6 full meetings to this study, that the committee begin the study on June 20th.
I will.
I'm sorry? 4 meetings as adopted. Sorry, four full meetings.
I will reread.
Thank you.
So, shall the amendment of Mr. Tucker be adopted? Ms. Bradford.
Point of order. I think someone had indicated that we wanted
That's what I asked
enough.
earlier for the
Yeah.
wording.
Yeah.
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. There's a vote. You can't have a point of order in the middle of a vote. I think the vote has to proceed.
Midst of doing a vote right now. So let's go to the recorded vote.
Okay. Shall the amendment as sub-amended of Mr. Tucker carry? Ms. Bradford.
No.
Mr. Collins. Mr. Jawari.
No.
Mr. Sarai.
No.
Mr. Souza. No. Mr. Loeb.
Yes.
Mr. Major. Yes. Mr. Soroka.
Yes.
Mr. Tucker. Yes. Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca.
Oui.
Mr. Cannings.
Yes.
Okay, so that then takes us, that passes, and it takes us back to the main motion. And do we have the main motion that we can read out with those amendments? I'm being a stickler just because it's important to get this one right. If the clerk could read us the motion, the way it now sits with the amendments, that includes the 4-week study that was just passed, and it includes the splitting committee meetings, 1-hour meetings each.
So I will now read the motion as amended. That pursuant to Standing Order 1083I, the committee study the use of the federal government research and development grants, funds, and contributions by the Canadian universities and research institutions in partnerships with entities connected to the People's Republic of China in areas including but not limited to photonics, artificial intelligence, quantum theory, biopharmaceuticals, and aerospace, and including but not limited to intellectual property transfers and developments with Huawei Technologies and National University of Defense Technology. That the committee hear from the Director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, department officials, top research officials from Canadian universities, the federal granting agencies, and any other witnesses deemed relevant to the study. That the committee allocate a minimum of 4 full meetings to the study. That the committee begin the study on June 20th. The committee split the meetings with the pay equity study, with this study being dedicated in the first hour, and that the committee report its findings to the House.
Okay. Well, we have, now we've got an amended motion. Mr. Collins.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. One thing we haven't talked about as part of the motion was the scope of the scope that has been presented as part of the original motion that was presented to the committee.
Sure.
And so as I'm reading through this, and sorry I packed up my computer, but I'm reading from my phone, you know, I look at the photonics, the artificial intelligence, the quantum theory. Again, I'm going to go back to what I talked about earlier in terms of many of these issues are being studied at other committees. And so I'm wondering whether there's an opportunity to take out or to add language to the study to get at that overlap that I've referenced several times here today. And I know this issue isn't new to the members opposite. I mean, I think some of them have even participated in other committees on the same issue. And so I just wonder if there's an opportunity, and I'll start with maybe amending it by removing Huawei, if I could. If there's an opportunity to just start to narrow it down, make it very generic instead of specific, I think that may help us in terms of choosing witnesses and then coming up with recommendations in the end that will serve us to help us with either government legislation or investments. And so if I could at this point in time, then I would move at a start to remove Huawei from the recommendation that's been put. Unless there's unanimous consent, then we can all agree upon that. Doesn't mean that someone can't ask a witness to come in and speak to those issues. But
so we have now we have a new amendment to the main motion, and that is to remove Huawei from the main motion. So discussions on the amendment. Mr. Tucker?
Just quickly, this removing, why are we hiding the truth of what Huawei's doing to our universities? This is a cover-up not just in a democracy, but our institutions. By removing one of the state sponsors of influence in the tech frontier from the influence of Beijing is, I think, insulting that we would not investigate what Huawei is doing in our universities. So Conservatives will be voting against this.
Okay, Mr. Collins?
Sure, I don't think it's hiding anything. I just think you're limiting the scope of the study by narrowing it down to one. There may be other companies that we may want to study as part of this. And so to suggest that it is one, understanding that questions have already been presented to other witnesses in other studies on Huawei, which no one has disputed in terms of the recommendations or the advice that have come from the witnesses. They've been included in the reports, if you recall. I think even prior to your time, Mr. Chair, there have been reports that have included some of the questions. Specifically, the member opposite has, Mr. Mazier has always raised that issue in terms of university and government, university and college relationships with government funding for that company. I would just say that we're limiting the study by narrowing it down to one company. And so I would say that if we can expand that language, if you have other suggestions to provide that builds upon that theme of foreign interference, whatever you want to call it, I think we need to be a little bit more inclusive rather than exclusive, and that's why I put the recommendation today.
Okay. Okay. Is there more discussion on this amendment? If not, we will call the vote on that. And we are getting close to 1:30, and if we need more time, we're going to have to go to a deviation, or we'll have to see whether the committee wants to adjourn at 1:30. So I haven't made that request yet, but I'm also trying to manage a meeting that's kind of bouncing in different areas right now. So let's go to the vote on the amendment, and then in the meantime, I'll have a quick discussion with the clerk when I can.
So this is on Mr. Collins' amendment to remove Huawei from the motion. So shall the amendment to the motion of Mr. Major carry? Ms. Bradford?
This is on Mr. Collins' amendment,
Yes,
right?
it's for Huawei.
In favor.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi?
Yes.
Mr. Sarai?
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
Mr. Lobb?
No.
Mr. Major?
No.
Mr. Soroka?
No.
Mr. Tucker?
No.
Monsieur Blanchette-Jonca?
No.
Mr. Cannings?
No.
Okay, so that amendment is defeated. Further discussion on the main motion. There's no further discussion on the main motion. Okay, Mr. Collins?
No, Mr. Chair, I would suggest that the next amendment would be that we add pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee request a comprehensive response. I think that's a standard language that we've seen in other motions that have been put to the committee and approved by the committee unanimously.
Sure, Mr. Tucker?
It's apparent that the cover-up continues as amendment after amendment gets added that has no merit. The Conservatives vote against any amendment that slows down the process to get to the answers of Beijing's influence at our post-secondary institutions.
Mr. Collins?
Look, there seems to be a conspiracy theory here in terms of that's all we've heard almost through every study on the other side of the table. And so while I'm not discounting the fact that we need to study some of these things, it's certainly their right to put it. The concern that I have is that this theme of, and you just heard the comments here now in terms of, cover up, conspiracy theory, we can use different words for it. I would say that this committee has worked very well from its inception in terms of looking at subject matters that help us move legislation forward and make strategic investments. In fact, the motion that today was preceded by the filibuster stands in the way of us moving forward on, I can count 3 or 4 different studies that we have in the works, including the one that was already approved by my colleague, MP Bradford. And so when we talk about slowing down the process, this meeting started with a filibuster. This meeting started with interrupting and advising the witnesses who came from, again, we had one witness who came from halfway around the country to be here today to provide her testimony, who probably prepared for several hours in terms of coming up with recommendations in her opening statement, as almost all witnesses do at all committees. And so to talk about slowing down the process, I think is a bit rich to hear it from the other side of the table. Okay. And so, I don't think, again, back to the amendment that I just put in terms of asking for a response is almost a standard common language that we'd see in almost every study recommendation that's come to this committee and all others that I've appeared at.
Ms. Bradford?
Yes, I'm absolutely astounded that the opposition would not want a comprehensive response. Why would the opposition, if you're really wanting to get to the bottom of something, not want to hear a government response? It just makes sense. Like if you're doing an objective investigation of any topic, I think you need to hear from all sides, not just witnesses that you line up that are going to perhaps support your already pre-concluded position. I think we would definitely need to hear a government response on this. We've had government witnesses on just about many of our other topics, and I think it would be very, very appropriate that we get a government response on this. Otherwise, it's clear that you're predetermining the outcome before we even start the study, which is not a good way to enter a study.
Okay, thank you. I was hoping to vote on this, but Mr. Tucker.
Yes, Chair. It's become very apparent to this side of the table that there's something here. There's something that they're hiding. This meeting confirmed where we put forward a motion. The Liberals have filibustered this study. There are issues at our universities that we need to look at the foreign influence. And this whole meeting, we suspended for over 50 minutes, which means we should be sitting until 1:50, not 1:30. And I suspect we were going to get shut down. And the answers that we are looking for, we will not stop asking these questions about the involvement of Beijing at our universities. This will continue past just this meeting, and it will continue the next. And we are not done trying to get to the bottom of how integrated Beijing is with our institutes across Canada. I think it's a shame that we never got a vote on the main motion because of amendments after amendments being added by the Liberals. But if we would like to go down this route, this is what is going to happen at this committee until we get the answers on this influence that is taking place in our country from a foreign state actor. This is wrong, and I hope that we can extend this meeting to 1:50, where they would make up the time that we were suspended, Chair.
Okay. No, I'm actually going to call the meeting at this point. I haven't asked for additional resources. I was wanting to see whether we were going to get to the main motion and get a vote. Evidently, that isn't going to happen today. So we're at 1:30, and I'll now adjourn the meeting, and we'll resume next week.